Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to have some fun with watercolor, and this was my kind of test piece, and it just wasn't doing exactly what I wanted, but I kind of like the idea of it. But I decided that I wanted to do it a little bit bigger. I wanted it to be a little bit juicier, and I'm going to paint it again, and this time you can paint along with me. So this was done on a 5x7 watercolor card, just a regular old Strathmore watercolor card. I decided that I wanted something that was a little bit more less uniform, a little bit more kind of spontaneous, so I grabbed this handmade paper. This is some older Nujabi. I hope I've worked on the right side. I don't even know. I haven't used this in so long, so I'm hoping it works out pretty well. I'm going to use watercolors from Turner, and you can find those at jerrysartorama.com. They're our sponsor. And I'm going to be using Creative Mark Mimic brushes, which are extremely thirsty synthetic brushes. So they behave kind of like an animal brush, animal hair brush, even though they are completely cruelty-free and synthetic. So what I'm going to do, I've kind of sketched out the coffee cup here on my paper, and I'll put a pattern in the video description for you so you can just transfer the basic lines onto your paper as well. And the first thing I'm going to do is just wet this shadow area. I want to get my dark values in right off the bat, and I'm going to use a combination of burnt umber, and these again are the Turner watercolors, and I like their burnt umber because it actually looks a lot like a burnt sienna. And I'm going to add some ultramarine blue. Sometimes a burnt umber can look kind of ashy and cold, and other times you get a warmer one. This is a warmer one, so I really like that it's quite a bit warmer. And I'm going to get that dark color right there up against the saucer. And I'm going to bring it right across the edge. And the reason I'm using this handmade paper is because I think that it'll give me some really beautiful texture, and I think it might really kind of show the pigments off to their best advantage. And I also think I can kind of do more of a just kind of a loosier, splashier painting, which is what I'm kind of after here. And I want to pull out a little shadow from that spoon overhang. Now that's actually, even though the reference photo I'm looking at has a really harsh edge to that shadow, I'm going to soften that a little bit. I'll clean my brush a little better than that. And I'm going to wet the paper around the shadow, and then I'm just going to go in along the edge and soften that out a little bit. There we go. I think like something, as I was working through my my piece for practice, I realized that I kind of felt like my cup had been floating in air, so I had given it kind of like a little horizon line for a table, but I didn't like how it was solid all the way across. I didn't really like that, so I decided that I would throw something in a little bit looser. Just put in a little bit of that color that I just had, freehand it about almost to the top of the cup, because you're looking down at the coffee at such a steep angle. Now the thing with a rough paper, you might notice here, is that the texture is so strong that your paint wants to kind of get caught up in it. So I'm just going to spray that a little bit to soften it. I want it to drip a little bit. There we go. And I also like the idea of like coffee spills and whatnot. I feel like I got a little too much in there. Now I have quite a bit of water here, and stuff is going to dry a little bit lighter, so you do want to kind of keep that in mind. The colors that I'm using are Pyrrole Scarlet, Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Sienna, and Permanent Yellow, which is a nice warm yellow. I'm going to make it kind of like an eggplant color here, and I'm going to flick some of that on there. I like this. Now, some people don't like this. They're like, oh, you just ruined the painting. Well, you know what? If you're not a fan of flicking, you don't have to do it. If you're curious about flicking, a great time to flick paint is at the beginning of your painting, before you don't have anything to lose, right? If you don't like it, well, you got the back side. You can use the back side of the paper, or you can, you can see it through, see if it's your cup of tea. If not, then you don't have to do it again. But it's your painting, so do it or don't do it. That's completely up to you. I do want a little color in the background. Now I noticed this paper, everything wants to kind of sit on the surface. Well, that looks really, that's weird. It doesn't look like an ultramarine blue. That looks almost like a phthalo blue right there. Strange. I've noticed like the paint wants to bead up on this paper, so it must have a pretty good amount of sizing, which is good. Sometimes handmade paper doesn't have much of a sizing and then it wants to pill on you, but I think this is going to be good. This has got a really beautiful rough texture. And I'm just going to bring that over there. I don't know why I wanted to do blue in the background. It's kind of funny. It kind of reminds you of a blue sky. I don't know why there would be a blue sky. Maybe you're sitting on the edge of your deck. You've got your coffee cup on the edge of the deck. Oh, I like that. There was snow in Maine today. Luckily, it didn't last. But, and sleet. But it does make you long for the days of drinking your coffee on the porch. I like to let my colors kind of flick down. I like to go, I have this saying, and it's if you're gonna fail, fail fast. So I'd like to jump in and just try this stuff right off the bat. If it doesn't work out, oh well. You know how we're 5 minutes in, we're 6 minutes in. So if it doesn't work out, you've only lost a few minutes. I like that background. I didn't tape it down, but if you taped it down, you'd have a pretty white border when you were done. But I just felt like just jumping right in. Now I did mark where the where there would be some like cream in the coffee there, like a pretty cream design. I thought about reserving it with some wax, but I think I can paint around it all right. It does seem like the paint, the water really stays where you put it on this paper, so I think I can manage well enough just to go in and wet around these marks. And I'm not even going to be that precise. I'm just going to make sure I don't go into the marks. And I'm going to go around here with the water. Now I'm going to grab some of the burnt umber, and I'm going to add a little ultramarine blue to that to darken it. And I'm just going to go in and add some of this darker color here and there. Not everywhere. I apologize for the background noise. It's really difficult to film without background noise this time of year, because we've got a furnace and it's cold in Maine. Alright, so I put some color in there, and that's kind of my cooler, darker color. Now I'm going to go in with some burnt umber on its own. You could even do some rings, like some coffee rings on the table, or some spilled coffee, because look how full this coffee cup is filled. So it would stand to reason that some would get spilled on the table. And plus it gives you just an interesting element. Something you could actually do if you wanted to is you could actually ink up the bottom of a cup and stamp it on your paper. Although at this angle you would be more likely to see an ellipse than a perfect circle. So just, you know, keep that in mind. Maybe taking like an old masking tape roll and squishing it, you know, save the cardboard roll, and you might be able to do a good ring that way. I love the texture of this paper though, it's so pretty. I haven't used this particular handmade paper in a while. I've been using the Shazan from India paper because a local art shop had it in stock, and I tried it. But I had big sheets of this stuff from an order a long time ago to use up. It's really fun. Okay, maybe a little bit more of the darker stuff right along the edge. All right, now I'm going to mix some Pyrrole Scarlet. Ooh, that's vibrant. Let me move that over so you can see. Look how bright that is. I'm going to mix that with some burnt umber. You might want to pre-wet your color a little bit. I've already been using these colors today, so they're juicy and ready to go. But if you find that your paint is not as reactive as you'd like, just spray it with a spray bottle before you, like a few minutes before you begin painting, and that will do the trick. There. That can give us some nice movement in there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is switch brushes, because I want a brush that's going to hold less water. So I'm going to switch over to a traditional golden Taklon brush, and what I'm going to do is kind of squeeze out the extra water, and I'm going to mix up really thick. I'm going to do the burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Wipe off the extra water before I grab that blue so that I get a nice thick pasty kind of texture. Texture to the paint, and I'm just going to kind of dab it in for these dark kind of specks of chocolate or cinnamon or whatever it is in the coffee. It just gives you a really neat texture. And because these are sedimentary colors, you're probably going to end up with some texture as they dry anyway. This just gives us a little bit extra texture. Maybe a little bit of the brown on its own. If your brush is dry, or pretty dry, you can, even if you haven't cleaned it, you can usually go back into the palette and grab some more. Now after it's dry, if you want to soften the swirls of cream, you can do that, but let it dry first, and then you can just kind of go in with a damp brush and soften it a little bit. While I have this color, I think I do want to add like a coffee ring. And I'll do this while there's still bits of wet paint, so that it'll give me the kind of that, it'll just kind of naturally flow together. And then I'll take that same color and just do some splats. Just protecting the area that's going to be a yellow mug. Somebody's messy with their coffee. Some mornings feel like that, don't they? You're like, just give me the coffee. Alright, so I think I'd be alright to paint this part of the mug. And I'm going to use this big number 12 round, but you use whatever you're comfortable with. There is a slice of white on the rim of the cup, so when I go in to paint the cup, what I'm going to do is just leave that gap of white. I do have some messy pencil marks there that I may erase when I'm done. We'll see. And I'm going to go for this band up here first, and I'll wet a little bit in the bottom here. And I am going to start off with my permanent yellow, and it's a very lemony yellow, and I'm put that at the edges because that's where this cup happens to be the lightest and coolest. I will share a reference photo as well, and links to the products that I am using. So I'm going in and putting in all the lighter spots that I see. If I see any bright white, I can reserve it, just not paint it. There's a little highlight coming from the spoon that I'll want to reserve. And now I'm going to grab a little bit of this ultramarine blue and brown mix, because there's kind of like a gray-green on the front there. And I'm going to paint that in. Don't second guess your eyes. See what your eyes tell you, that you know it's a yellow mug and it would be yellow all the way around. Trust your eyes. And this isn't going to capture the smoothness as much because it is such a rough paper, but it will do a pretty good job at capturing the feeling of your coffee. I've got a little bit of the scarlet added into this. Now that is such a potent color that you do have to be kind of careful with it. I think I'm going to blend it up with a clean damp brush. It's okay not to paint everything. In fact, I think this will have a lot more impact and meaning if you don't, if you kind of let the colors flow and do their thing. Just guide them a little bit. Grabbing a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to try to just kind of trace the edge here and then kind of let it disappear to nothing as I go around the back. And the same thing over here. Fade off to nothing because you wouldn't be able to see any of that yellow edge from there. This is kind of bugging me here, that darker area, so I'm going to wipe it away. Use my bigger brush for that. Clean it off. Blot it and just kind of wipe it up. That's better. That was just way too dark. Now, the next thing I can work on probably be the handle. I don't think I'll be getting into too much trouble there if I work on the handle. I can scrub it. Since that was ultramarine blue, it will lift off pretty easily. I don't really think I need to re-wet this, like re-wet the handle because it's such a small space. I'm just going to grab some yellow And I'm gonna paint around some highlights, leave some little, like that glimmer right there. Leave some highlights, grab a little bit of this reddish, red and orange mix, add that in there. Maybe even a little bit of burnt umber. That's a kind of a nice one for your shadows on the yellow. You can also use the purpley mix. If you take the red and blue together again, they'll make that plummy color, and that would be a nice yellow shadow. So any place you want to just kind of add a little shadow, and it will kind of help make everything else seem a little vibrant, use that color. I'm going to put a little bit of that right here at the bottom, where you can see kind of the underneath of the cup, not the underneath of the cup, but you can see where it's kind of going into the little hole of the saucer. And I'm also going to go right ahead and put the shadow right under the spoon there. Need to mix up a little bit more of that color. That's a nice color. When you have warm colors though, the one thing to keep in mind, anytime you have warmer colors, which means the color would lean more to its warmer counterpart, like a pyrrole scarlet's more like an orange than like a violet. Those colors will make more opaque mixes. So just kind of keep that in mind. Your warm colors are more likely to make mud because they tend to be more opaque. And I think I'll get a little bit more of that in there. I like to get some nice strong contrasts. I think it really helps a painting. In fact, I think I'll take some of this color and slice it right under the saucer there too. That's a little damp, so I do have to be careful that I don't get back runs, so I want to make sure my brush isn't super wet. This might have not been a great idea, but I'm going to go with it. I've already committed. I think it'll be fine. I'm just kind of dry brushing it out so it can kind of normalize the water that it's mixing into so I don't get a bloom. So there's a little tip there that you can do. And I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow right underneath where the spoon is resting on the edge. This paper is so rough. It was weird to draw on it because my pencil wanted to keep skipping. Okay. The good thing about this type of paper is that it likes to, it doesn't, it almost like the texture in the paper wants to keep the paint where you put it, so that can be very useful. You're not going to end up with stuff running all over the place so much. I like this burnt sienna red combo in here. I think this is kind of lively. See, they're not, even where the wet colors are touching, they're really not flowing together, which is really helpful, actually. I'll link up to this paper as well because it's really fun to play with because it's got such wonderful texture, and I don't recall it being all that expensive because I bought this years ago. And this is the rough. It's either called rough or extra rough, and it certainly is. Alright, now I'm going to grab some more of the yellow. We're going to let this mix on the paper, and that's what I'm trying to do mostly with this, is let stuff mix on the paper so we do keep that vibrancy, so we get a nice loose look, and it stays vibrant, and we avoid mud because we have all these warm colors that we have to keep an eye out for. So I'm just kind of letting them combine on the paper. You just got to make sure that you keep the tension of the water about the same, so you're not like putting a puddle on top of something that's starting to dry. That's when you end up with your blossoms and your trouble there. You can neaten up edges. Just be careful that, because if it is wet, there's a good chance it's going to flow, even on a rough paper like this. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to dry this, and then we'll come back and work on the spoon. Something actually I want to show you really quick before I dry this is that if you notice that there are some highlights that you want, take a dry brush and go and just kind of brush over that area and let the paintbrush drink up the extra. Okay, if you find it's not picking up anymore, clean it, clean your brush, blot it off, just go back in and drink up that extra, and that way if you need something defining, like I felt like the saucer needed a little bit of shape to it on the inside, you can go in and you can add that. But you have to do that before the paint really sets. The other thing about warm colors is they tend to be less staining, so you will be able to lift them a little bit easier. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out, because that's kind of a really helpful thing to know. Now I am going to dry this with my heat tool. You can let yours dry naturally, and we'll come back to finish it up, because we really don't have that much to do on a loose style painting like this. This paper is kind of weird. It like soaked, it almost felt like a wet sponge when I was drying it. I was a little disappointed that it didn't have more of granulation in these really wet into wet areas, but that's all right. I really like this capillary action I have in this shadow here. I think that's kind of fun. But you know what? Anytime you use a different paint or different paper, you're gonna learn different things about it, and I think that's part of the fun. Now again, with mixing on the paper, I'm gonna mix up a little bit of ultramarine blue here in one of these wells, and I am gonna do a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna in another well, just so I can kind of have them to grab really quickly. And then I still have the ultramarine blue and red from another well. And of course, any colors that we have here could also be reflected in that spoon, so we want to kind of keep that in mind. And I'm just going to kind of start at one end and work my way down, and I'm going to start with kind of the ultramarine blue on its own, and just kind of go up here in the edge of it. Sometimes I find that, like, if I'm painting something that's like a hard, like made of a hard material, if I use a chisel edge brush, like a flat brush, I'll have a little bit easier time, like, not fussing with it and creating it a lot more naturally. There's a really dark curve at the bottom there. That's dark in there. So I'm just kind of, instead of painting with the broad part of the brush, I'm painting with the chisel edge. I don't know if I'll do that for the whole thing, because it is a little awkward. I feel like I'm not getting the bowl shape of it very well with that. Okay, I'm going to switch to, I think I'll switch to that number 6 regular kind of synthetic. Grab a little bit of yellow, put a little yellow in there for the reflections. Get a little more blue. This paint's pretty watery, so there actually wasn't a terrible shift, I wouldn't say, between dark and light here. I think that the spoon is kind of weird shaped. I think it's just the way the reflections are going on it. I'm gonna get a little more blue in here. I'm gonna grab a little bit of this plum. I'm gonna grab the color, and then I'm gonna actually blot the belly of the brush a little bit, because I feel like it's just too much paint. And then I'm going to add that to that darker shadow that I painted in with the burnt sienna. Let the colors mix and mingle on there. It's clear that it's a spoon. You know, I think that's like when you're painting loosely, kind of put as few marks as you need to convey what it is that you're painting. Get a little bit of that reddish color reflections in there. You want to add those reflections of the things that are around it, but you also don't want to just completely obliterate. You don't want to like completely blur those lines. Now I'm going to pull out a little bit of a highlight. Still feel like I've got the shape of this weird. pulling out a curved highlight in here will help like sell the fact that that's a bowl of a spoon. I don't know how much abuse this paper is going to take, so so I just want to be a little bit mindful of that so I don't end up, you know, making it all pilled and yucky. Alright, now I'm going to give that a rest, and I am going to go right with the pan. I want you to see how thick this is. And, oh, I got some beads of water on my brush. I don't want that to slip down and dilute my paint. I'm going to pick up my paint. See that? Look at that. Look at it on my, look how opaque that looks. Look how much I have. Okay, it's very thick. And now I'm going to put the yellow rim around my saucer here, very up on the tip of my brush up here. I might need to reload or add some water because this is so thick. I think I do need a smidgen of water in there. And I'm going to be gently pressing down on my brush more as it gets towards the front, because then you'd see a little bit more of that edge. This might be a good one to do with the chisel edge brush, actually, because I find that depositing thicker paint is easier with the chisel edge, but I don't find it to be as expressive. Like varying thicks and thins isn't as easy with a chisel edge. But I might have to do that. I might, if I feel like this is really rough and I'm not getting the effect that I want, then I will go in with a chisel edge. Actually, why don't we compare? I might need the round just for the tight curve up there. It's a little bit flattened out here because of the foreshortening you have back there. Alright, let me load up this sucker. And oh, it still doesn't really want to deposit the paint because the paper's so rough. There we go. It's a little bit better. Alright, so that's a little limitation with this paper going, you know, dry on dry. It's just a little bit of a limitation because of the texture. I'm going to see if I can just very gently get that. You don't have as much variety in the stroke width when you're using the chisel edge of a brush, but I think that works pretty good. Now, I do think that I can do some nice expressive strokes with this. And I really like how loose that I had it painted in the saucer. The cup I felt like I overdid a little bit. So I think maybe if I just put some kind of like swashy, whooshy strokes with the flat, it might help the mug a little bit. And then add a few in the saucer around the highlight so I can kind of strengthen the highlight that I wiped out. And the minute when you're hovering your arm over a painting, like I'm hovering it, you do have to, if you can get your pinky or something on the table, have something to lean against to steady your hand, it will really help. I just felt like it needed that little stripe of yellow back there. And a little bit of the burnt umber red mix, I'm going to give it a little slice in the front as well. Okay, now I do feel like I need a little bit more going on with the shadow underneath there. So I'm going to grab my number 8 round here, grab that purpley color that we mixed. It was just the ultramarine and the pyrrole scarlet. That's the color we have right there. I don't want it super, super bright. I just want to kind of extend that shadow a little bit. Maybe drip a little bit in there so it doesn't lift up. Sometimes it wants to lift up what's underneath with these warmer colors. Maybe just deepen it where the spoon touches, and also here in the bottom of this mug. Trying not to get rid of that kind of capillary action that was really pretty. Alright, so last thing I want to do here is just maybe add a little bit of just either gel pen or paint pen. And I just want to do that to the edge up here. Is this still wet? I might need to dry that. Oh, it feels pretty dry. Just to get any sort of little We'll see if that just kind of disappears. I'll have to go back in and go back in there and reapply. Sometimes that happens because if you're going on wet paint, it's just going to mix in with what you have underneath. And I can also throw in a few other ooh, that's scratchy. That doesn't sound very good, does it? You can throw in a few other just little gestural lines for the cream. And if you have anything that you want to just sharpen, oh shoot, I just got some brown in the sky, oh well. You can sharpen it up. I almost dipped that in the water. That would not have been good. I'm gonna see if I can lift out that little mistake that I made. Wait, did I just do that? Oh, you know what? No, I did that before. I did that when I was flicking on brown. That's an old mistake. We'll leave the old mistake in. That's fine. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is dry it, and then I'll show you with it all dry, just so you can kind of see how it turned out. Okay, here it is dry. I really like the way it turns out. Now, if you don't like some of the pencil marks showing, what you can do is actually use a soft eraser. Make sure your paper's dry. And you can go in and erase some of those lines. Now, depending on the paper and paint you're using, it might actually rub off your paint. This shouldn't happen with any professional grade paints, but if you're using student grade paints, oftentimes they're just so chalky because of the extenders they put in there to make the paints last longer. You could end up, you know, erasing away your paint, but you should be all right with your artist grade paints and paper because they should be designed for that. Now I'm just going to brush the crumbs away. Make sure that I brush away any crumbs. There, I like that. I usually like the pencil marks, and for the most part I did, but where I had so many, like, I always go a little crazy when I'm doing the ellipses on jars and cups and stuff, so I did want to get that away, and I didn't want to lock it underneath any paint pen, and I thought I might get a little bit sharper there. I also thought I might do a little bit over here, and maybe right there. The highlights are so fun. They're just addicting. Now I do want to get, like, I want to separate the spoon from the shadow, so I just get a nice little glint of highlight there. I left a good highlight there, so I don't need to bother with that. And here the spoon was a little wet. Can you see that? The spoon was a little wet, so I wanted to go back in with that. Oh, I really like this. I like this so much better than the version that I did previously. And you know what? That just goes to show you that if you're not happy with something, that doesn't mean that that's all there is. That's what you get. You get one try, and if you don't do it right, then sorry about your luck. No, you have as many times as you want to get it right, to do it again. I want to highlight from that, kind of reflecting up. So have fun with it. It's your painting. Do it however you like. I really like how this turned out. I like it a lot better than this one here. I think this one has a lot more energy and life, and it was certainly more fun to paint. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any questions, you can leave them down there too. I will have all of the products I used linked up in the video description, as well as a 25% off and free shipping coupon to jerrysartorama.com. Please read the terms and conditions. Basically, it means stuff that's already on a crazy sale won't be included in the coupon, but your regular price stuff is, and the regular price is much less than your average art store. So check them out if you want to get these supplies. I thank them for their support, and I thank you for your support in watching this tutorial today. If you want more crafty goodness, check out the links showing up on your screen right now. You can click on one of those and go to another fabulous tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Leave me a thumbs up before you go if you don't mind. I do appreciate it. Until next time, happy crafting.